What would you do if the world judged you by your appearance before your abilities? For Tara Thomas, it wasn't just a question, it was a reality. Stopped at an airport gate and humiliated by staff who had no idea who she really was, Tara faced a challenge that would test her resolve. But little did they know, this wasn't just any passenger. They had just crossed paths with their new boss, and the lesson she was about to teach would leave everyone speechless. The airport buzzed with the cacophony of rolling luggage, boarding announcements, and excited travelers hurrying to catch their flights. Tara Thomas stepped into the terminal with an air of quiet confidence, her sleek black travel suit and low-heeled pumps cutting a sharp silhouette against the chaotic backdrop. Her carry-on, a modest leather bag, was slung over her shoulder. She didn't need to advertise her wealth or power. Her presence spoke volumes. She glanced at her ticket, first class, priority boarding. The thought of finally relaxing on this flight, after weeks of rigorous meetings and travel, brought a small smile to her lips. Tara was returning to the headquarters of Thomas Air, the very airline her late father had painstakingly built from the ground up. She'd recently been named CEO, a position she was determined to use to bring change, innovation, and inclusivity. As she approached the priority boarding area, her calm demeanor was disrupted by the sharp voice of a gate agent. "Excuse me, ma'am, this is the priority line," the woman said, her tone dripping with condescension. She was young, blonde, and wore the airline's crisp blue uniform, complete with a name badge that read Selena. Her scrutinizing eyes lingered on Tara's simple outfit, a flicker of disdain crossing her face. Tara stopped in her tracks, confused. "I know," she replied evenly, holding up her boarding pass. Selena didn't take it. Instead, she crossed her arms and tilted her head, her expression challenging. "Priority boarding is for first-class passengers only." Tara raised an eyebrow, unfazed by the woman's tone. "And I am a first-class passenger." Selena's lips curled into a mocking smile. "Right. If you'll just step aside, I'll need to check the authenticity of your ticket." Tara's fingers tightened around the boarding pass, but her face remained calm. Years of navigating boardrooms full of dismissive men had trained her to stay composed under pressure. "You can check my ticket right here," she said, handing it to Selena. The woman barely glanced at it before handing it back. "This doesn't look right. I'll need you to wait over there while we handle the real priority passengers." A few travelers in the nearby economy line had paused to watch the exchange. Tara could hear their murmurs, some stifling laughter. Heat crept up her neck, but she forced herself to stay collected. "I assure you, this ticket is valid," Tara said. "Why don't you scan it?" "I'm not wasting time on counterfeits," Selena snapped, her voice rising slightly, drawing more attention. "Step aside, ma'am." Before Tara could respond, a second airline employee, a tall man with a no-nonsense expression, approached. His badge identified him as Roger. "What's the problem here, Selena?" he asked. Selena gestured toward Tara with an exaggerated sigh. "This woman is trying to pass off a fake first-class ticket. I was just about to have security handle it." Roger's eyes swept over Tara, lingering on her understated attire. He didn't question Selena's accusation. Instead, he turned to Tara with an air of authority. "Ma'am, we have procedures in place for situations like this. Please cooperate and wait until we can verify your ticket." Tara's patience was wearing thin. She met Roger's gaze with unwavering calm. "You haven't even scanned my ticket. How about we start there before assuming it's fake?" Roger frowned but didn't move. Instead, Selena smirked, emboldened by her colleague's support. "Listen, there's no need to make this difficult," she said, her voice patronizing. "If you just go sit down, we'll get to you when we can." By now, a small crowd had gathered, their whispers cutting through the tension. Some passengers openly stared, while others exchanged judgmental glances. Tara felt the weight of their gazes, but she refused to let it show. "I'm not causing a disturbance," she said, her voice sharp now. "I'm asking for fair treatment. Scan my ticket, and you'll see I belong in this line." Selena rolled her eyes dramatically. "Security it is," she muttered, pulling out her walkie-talkie. Before Tara could respond, a voice from behind interrupted. "Is there a problem here?" Tara turned to see an elderly man in a neatly pressed suit stepping forward. His kind eyes flicked between Tara and the staff. "I couldn't help but overhear. This young lady has a first-class ticket, doesn't she?" Selena scoffed. "That's what she claims, but we're handling it." "Doesn't seem like you are," the man said, his tone laced with disapproval. "She's shown you her ticket. Just scan it, and let her through. "Sir, please stay out of this," Roger said curtly. "We have policies to follow." Tara felt a flicker of gratitude for the man's intervention, but knew it wouldn't be enough. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "If you're calling security, I insist they check my ticket properly when they get here. This treatment is unacceptable." Selena's smirk widened. "You're welcome to file a complaint after you wait over there." Tara's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain calm. Let them call security, she thought. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. As the tension thickened, Tara's gaze swept over the crowd, taking in the mix of curiosity, amusement, and indifference. None of them knew who she was, or the storm that was about to break. This wasn't just about boarding a plane. It was about principle, and Tara Thomas never lost a battle. The murmurs among the gathered passengers swelled as two uniformed security officers approached the boarding gate. One was short and stocky, with an impatient expression, while the other, taller and seemingly more experienced, scanned the situation with calculating eyes. Selena straightened, her smug demeanor intensifying, as if their arrival confirmed her authority. "There she is," Selena said, pointing at Tara as if identifying a criminal. "She's refusing to cooperate and causing a disturbance." The taller officer, whose badge read Officer Robert, raised a hand to silence her. "Ma'am," he addressed Tara with professional calm. "Can I see your ticket and ID?" Finally, someone willing to act reasonably. Tara handed over her boarding pass and identification without a word, her calm composure intact despite the churning frustration beneath the surface. She watched as Officer Robert inspected the documents, his eyes narrowing slightly. The stocky officer, however, wasn't as measured. "You know, we get a lot of these cases, people trying to sneak into first class for the perks," he said, his voice dripping with unnecessary condescension. "It's not going to work, ma'am." Tara locked eyes with him, her voice firm. "If you take a moment to verify my ticket, you'll find that I don't need to sneak into anything." Officer Robert ignored his partner's comment and stepped aside to scan the boarding pass at the gate kiosk. The soft beep of the scanner filled the tense silence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the screen lit up with a green check mark and the words "First Class, Priority Boarding." Robert's brows lifted, and he turned back to Tara, his demeanor shifting. "Your ticket is valid, Miss Thomas. My apologies for the inconvenience." Tara gave a tight nod, her satisfaction tempered by the unnecessary humiliation she'd endured. Before she could respond, Selena interjected. "There must be a mistake," she said, stepping toward the kiosk. "Run it again." Robert shot her a sharp look. "It's not a mistake. The ticket is legitimate." Selena's face flushed, but she quickly recovered, her tone turning defensive. "Well, it's not about the ticket." She was being difficult and disruptive. Tara cut her off, her voice clear and steady. "I was standing here, minding my business, until you decided I didn't belong in this line." Roger, who had been silently watching the exchange, finally spoke up. "Selena, maybe we should just let her board and move on." "Let her board?" Selena hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You saw her. She doesn't even look like she can afford a first-class ticket." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, and even the stocky security officer looked uncomfortable. Tara felt the heat of anger rising within her, but she didn't let it show. Instead, she took a step closer to Selena, her voice low but commanding. "Do you realize what you just said, and how damaging that mindset is, not just to me, but to everyone watching this unfold?" Selena's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Her earlier confidence crumbled under the weight of Tara's steady gaze. Before Selena could muster a response, the airport PA system crackled to life. "Attention, passengers and staff, please welcome Tara Thomas, the new CEO of Thomas Air, who will be boarding flight 472 shortly." The announcement echoed across the terminal, silencing the murmurs. All eyes turned to Tara, and an audible wave of shock coursed through the crowd. Selena froze, her face a mix of disbelief and panic. Roger's mouth dropped open, and even the security officers looked stunned. Tara remained composed, letting the weight of the announcement settle over the moment before speaking. "It seems there's been some confusion," she said, her voice carrying a quiet authority. "I'm not only a first-class passenger, but also your new CEO." The impact of her words was immediate. Passengers began murmuring among themselves, some audibly expressing their disapproval of how she had been treated. Selena stumbled back a step, her expression shifting from smugness to outright fear. Miss Thomas, I didn't. No, Selena stammered, her earlier arrogance replaced by desperation. I wasn't trying to. Tara raised a hand, silencing her. Stop. This isn't about me being the CEO. This is about how you treated someone based on your assumptions. What if I hadn't been in this position? Would you have treated me, or anyone else, any differently? Selena's face turned crimson, her earlier confidence shattered. I didn't mean. You did, Tara interrupted, her voice firm but calm. And that's exactly the problem. Roger, still standing nearby, began to stammer an apology. Miss Thomas, we were just following protocols. Was humiliating a passenger part of those protocols? Tara asked, her tone sharper now. Or was that your personal judgment clouding your professionalism? Roger fell silent, his eyes darting nervously to the ground. Tara turned to Officer Robert. Thank you for handling this appropriately once you had the facts. I appreciate your professionalism. Robert nodded, looking relieved to be on her good side. Of course, Miss Thomas. Turning back to the gathered crowd, Tara addressed the passengers. What you witnessed today is exactly what I aim to change as CEO of this airline. Everyone deserves respect, regardless of how they look, dress, or where they're from. That is a commitment I'm making, not just as a leader, but as a human being. Her words were met with a smattering of applause from the onlookers, some even offering words of encouragement and support. Selena, however, looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Tara collected her ticket from Officer Robert and walked toward the jet bridge. As she passed Selena, she paused. Consider this your final warning, she said quietly. This airline is no place for discrimination. If I hear about another incident like this, you won't have the opportunity to apologize. With that, she strode onto the plane, leaving behind a stunned gate staff and a crowd that had just witnessed the beginning of a transformation. Tara Thomas stepped into the pristine first-class cabin, the soft hum of the engines and the polished luxury contrasting sharply with the chaos she'd just left behind. Her steps were purposeful, her posture unyielding. She could still feel the weight of the passengers' stares, the whispers of astonishment following her down the jet bridge. The flight attendant stationed in the cabin greeted her with a warm smile, the tension from the gate yet to reach the in-flight crew. Welcome aboard, Miss Thomas, she said, glancing briefly at the tablet in her hand before continuing. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to make your flight more comfortable. Tara nodded politely and took her seat near the front of the cabin. The plush leather seats and attentive service were familiar comforts, but today, they did little to soothe the simmering emotions beneath her calm exterior. She placed her carry-on bag under the seat and leaned back, her mind replaying the events of the past hour. Tara had dealt with prejudice before, countless times, in fact. Whether it was subtle underestimations in corporate boardrooms or blatant dismissals like Selena's, she had faced them all with poise and determination. But this incident felt heavier, perhaps because it had happened under the banner of her own company. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, the CEO of one of the largest airlines in the world, and she had just been denied her rightful place by employees who were supposed to embody her company's values. This is more than an incident, she thought. This is a symptom of a deeper issue. As the plane continued to board, Tara noticed passengers trickling into first class, some casting hesitant glances her way. Among them was the elderly man who had spoken up for her at the gate. He offered her a kind smile as he passed, and she returned it, silently grateful for his intervention. Just as the boarding door was about to close, Roger, the mail gate agent, entered the cabin. His eyes darted nervously around before landing on Tara. He hesitated, then approached her seat, clutching what looked like a handwritten note. Miss Thomas, he began, his voice low and uncertain. I wanted to personally apologize for what happened back at the gate. There's no excuse for the way you were treated. Tara studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. And yet, it happened, she replied evenly. Why is that, Roger? Roger shifted uncomfortably. I guess we've been trained to look for certain things, you know, to spot potential issues before they happen. And you decided I was an issue, Tara said, her voice cool but piercing, not based on my actions, but on how I looked. Roger's face flushed. I didn't mean. But you did, Tara interrupted. And that's what needs to change. Apologizing to me is one thing, But what about the next passenger who doesn't fit your idea of what a first-class traveler should look like? Roger's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Finally, he handed her the note. I know an apology isn't enough, but I wrote this in case you wanted to report me to HR. It's a statement admitting what happened. Tara took the note, her eyes narrowing slightly. Interesting, she thought. Roger's willingness to own up to his mistake was unexpected, and while it didn't absolve him, it was a step in the right direction. I appreciate your honesty, she said, folding the note and tucking it into her bag. But remember, actions speak louder than words. Let's see how you handle yourself moving forward. Roger nodded, his face a mixture of relief and lingering guilt. Thank you, Miss Thomas. I won't let this happen again. As Roger retreated, Tara turned her attention back to the cabin. The elderly man from earlier was seated a few rows behind her, his eyes meeting hers briefly before he gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. Nearby, a young woman in a business suit whispered something to her companion, her expression a mixture of admiration and curiosity. The murmurs around her weren't lost on Tara. She knew that news of the incident at the gate and her identity would spread among the passengers. It was a teachable moment, one she intended to address, but she would do so on her terms. The plane taxied down the runway, the cabin lights dimming as the engines roared to life. Tara closed her eyes briefly, letting the vibrations of the takeoff ground her thoughts. She had always loved flying. Her father's passion for aviation had been infectious, and she'd spent countless hours as a child listening to his stories about the early days of Thomas Air. Those memories were a constant reminder of why she'd taken on the immense responsibility of leading the company, to honor his legacy while forging her own path. As the plane leveled out at cruising altitude, the flight attendant returned with a glass of champagne. Compliments of the crew, Miss Thomas, she said with a warm smile. Congratulations on your new role. Tara accepted the glass, her mind already racing with ideas. This wasn't just about fixing a flawed system. It was about redefining the culture of her airline from the ground up. She would ensure that every employee, from gate agents to executives, understood that respect and dignity were non-negotiable. Tara pulled out her notebook and began jotting down her thoughts. The incident at the gate wasn't an isolated event. It was a reflection of a systemic issue that demanded immediate action. She outlined plans for mandatory inclusivity training, anonymous employee evaluations, and a revamped customer service protocol. But she also knew that real change would require more than policies. It would need a shift in mindset, one that started with leadership. As she wrote, the elderly man leaned forward from his seat, clearing his throat gently. Excuse me, Miss Thomas, he said. I just wanted to say how much I admire the way you handled yourself back there. It couldn't have been easy. Tara looked up, her expression softening. Thank you, she said. It wasn't. But moments like these remind me why I do what I do. He nodded, his eyes thoughtful. I've flown with this airline for years, and I can tell you, it's in good hands. Tara smiled, the weight of the day momentarily lifting. I appreciate that, but there's still a lot of work to be done. As the plane soared through the clouds, Tara leaned back in her seat, her gaze drifting to the horizon outside the window. She had faced a challenge today, but she knew it was just one of many she would encounter as CEO. Still, she was ready. With a steady hand and an unshakable resolve, Tara Thomas was determined to turn Thomas Air into a company that stood for excellence in both service and humanity. And she would start by ensuring no one else ever experienced what she had today. The gentle hum of the engines filled the cabin as the flight continued smoothly at cruising altitude. Tara Thomas sat quietly in her first-class seat, her mind still replaying the events that had unfolded at the gate. While the immediate confrontation was behind her, the broader implications weighed heavily on her. She wasn't just a passenger who had been wronged. She was the CEO of the airline. That responsibility gave her a unique power, but also an unshakable duty to act. As the flight attendant passed by, Tara gestured for her attention. Could you let the captain know I'd like to address the crew and passengers before we land? The attendant blinked, momentarily surprised, then nodded. Of course, Miss Thomas. I'll inform him right away. The decision to speak wasn't made lightly. Tara understood the gravity of her position and the opportunity she had to turn this uncomfortable incident into a moment of learning and accountability, not just for the staff involved, but for everyone who witnessed it. As the flight attendant walked away, Tara's attention was drawn to the aisle. Selena, the gate agent, entered the first-class cabin hesitantly. Her uniform, once crisp and authoritative, now seemed to hang heavily on her. As she approached Tara's seat, her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, and her usually confident demeanor was replaced with nervous hesitation. "Miss Thomas," Selina began, her voice soft and almost unrecognizable compared to the sharp tone she'd used earlier. "I wanted to apologize again. I know what I did was wrong, and I deeply regret my actions." Tara studied her for a moment, her expression calm but unreadable. "What exactly do you regret, Selina?" Selina swallowed, her eyes darting briefly to the other passengers in the cabin, who were watching the interaction intently. "I regret judging you unfairly," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I let my assumptions cloud my judgment, and I treated you in a way that was completely unacceptable." Tara nodded slowly, her gaze steady. "And if I weren't the CEO, would you still be here apologizing?" The question hung in the air, cutting through the tense silence like a blade. Selina's face paled. I'd like to think I would," she stammered, "but I don't know." That's an honest answer," Tara said, her tone cool but not unkind. "And it's exactly why this incident matters. It's not about me. It's about the deeper issue of how we treat people based on appearances, assumptions, and biases." Selina nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I promise I'll do better. Please, give me a chance to prove that." Tara's gaze softened slightly. "A chance to do better is earned through action, not words. This isn't just about your career, Selina. It's about who you are as a person. Reflect on that." With that, Selina nodded silently and retreated, her posture slumped as she walked back down the aisle. Tara sighed softly, the weight of the situation pressing down on her again. She could only hope this experience would spark a lasting change in Selina and others like her. Shortly before landing, the flight attendant returned to inform Tara that the captain had approved her request to address the crew and passengers. The announcement crackled over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are honored to have Miss Tara Thomas, the new CEO of Thomas Air, aboard today. She'd like to share a few words with all of us." "Miss Thomas." Tara stood and walked to the front of the first-class cabin, the eyes of every passenger following her. Some looked curious, others expectant. As she reached the small space by the galley, she picked up the microphone and took a deep breath before speaking. "Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're enjoying your flight. My name is Tara Thomas, and I've recently taken on the role of CEO of Thomas Air. I wanted to take a moment to address something that happened earlier today, something that I believe is important for all of us to reflect on." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "Today, I experienced an incident at the boarding gate that reminded me of why I took this role in the first place. I was judged and treated unfairly, not because of my actions, but because of assumptions about who I am. Unfortunately, this isn't an isolated experience. It happens to people every day, in airports, workplaces, and beyond." Tara's voice grew firmer, her passion breaking through the calm veneer. "As CEO, I want to make it clear that Thomas Air is committed to excellence, not just in our services, but in the way we treat every single person who walks through our doors. Respect, dignity, and fairness are not optional. They are essential. And it starts with us, the staff and leadership of this company." She glanced at Selina and Roger, who were standing near the back of the first-class cabin, their faces a mix of shame and reflection. "Mistakes happen. What matters is how we learn from them and what we do to ensure they don't happen again. That's the culture I want to build here at Thomas Air." Her gaze swept across the cabin, meeting the eyes of several passengers. "To those of you who witnessed the incident earlier, thank you for your patience. To those who spoke up, thank you for your courage. And to all of you, thank you for trusting Thomas Air with your journey. I promise we will strive to be better, because we must." As Tara handed the microphone back to the flight attendant, the cabin erupted into applause. Some passengers stood, their claps echoing through the plane. Tara smiled, humbled by the reaction, but aware that the real work was only just beginning. Returning to her seat, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had turned an uncomfortable experience into a teachable moment, one that would resonate far beyond this flight. The plane rolled to a smooth halt at the terminal, its engines powering down as the passengers stirred from their seats. Tara Thomas remained seated, allowing the other travelers to disembark first. She was in no rush, Her mind was already focused on the actions she needed to take now that her journey had brought her back to headquarters. The elderly man who had supported her earlier passed by her seat, pausing briefly. "Miss Thomas," he said softly, "thank you for your words. You've inspired more people than you know today." Tara smiled warmly, her gratitude genuine. "Thank you for standing up when it mattered. People like you make this world better." He gave a modest nod before continuing down the aisle. As the cabin emptied, the same flight attendant who had served her earlier approached. "Miss Thomas, I just wanted to say what you did up there. It meant a lot to all of us." Tara nodded, appreciating the sincerity. "Thank you. Now it's time to make sure those words translate into action." When Tara stepped off the jet bridge into the terminal, a small group of employees from Thomas Air's headquarters stood waiting. They had been alerted of her arrival after the events on the plane, and their faces reflected a mixture of respect and unease. Among them was Rita Roberts, her chief operating officer, whose sharp suit and confident posture exuded authority. "Welcome back, Miss Thomas," Rita greeted, extending a hand. "We heard about the incident at the gate. I want to assure you, we take this very seriously." Tara shook her hand firmly but held her gaze. "Good. Because what happened today is more than just an incident. It's a symptom of a larger issue, one we're going to address immediately." Rita nodded, though her expression betrayed a hint of apprehension. "I've already scheduled a meeting with the team to discuss our next steps." "Excellent," Tara replied, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "Let's not waste any time." Later that afternoon, Tara stood at the head of a long, glass conference table in Thomas Air's sleek headquarters. Around her sat department heads, senior managers, and legal representatives, all of whom had been briefed on the morning's events. The atmosphere was tense, the silence heavy as Tara scanned the room. "Let's start with this," Tara began, her voice calm but firm. "What happened this morning is unacceptable. And if it happened to me, the CEO, then I can only imagine how often it's happening to other passengers who don't have the privilege of my position." She let her words hang in the air, watching as the discomfort spread across the table. Some avoided her gaze. Others shifted uneasily in their chairs. "Our brand stands for more than just luxury and convenience," Tara continued. "It stands for respect, inclusivity, and dignity. Or at least, it's supposed to. But if we don't embody those values in every interaction, we're failing, not just as a business, but as people." Tara laid out a comprehensive plan, her voice steady as she detailed each point. Mandatory inclusivity training. Every employee, from the ground staff to senior executives, will undergo rigorous inclusivity and unconscious bias training. And I mean everyone. No exceptions. Anonymous feedback system will establish a system for passengers and employees to report incidents of discrimination or mistreatment anonymously. Every report will be taken seriously and investigated thoroughly. Performance evaluations. Customer service will be a measurable performance metric for all staff. Promotions and raises will depend, in part, on how well employees uphold our values. Accountability measures. Incidents like this one will have real consequences. There will be no second chances for blatant discrimination. The room was silent as Tara finished, her unwavering determination leaving no room for doubt. These changes won't be easy, but they're necessary. If anyone here doesn't agree, you're welcome to leave. I only want people on my team who are committed to making this company better. As expected, not everyone embraced Tara's vision immediately. One department head, Greg, cleared his throat and spoke up. "Miss Thomas, while I respect your passion, implementing changes like these will be costly and time-consuming. It could affect our bottom line." Tara met his gaze, her expression cool but resolute. "What will affect our bottom line more, Greg? The cost of these changes, or the cost of losing passengers who don't feel respected? Our reputation is priceless, and I won't let it be tarnished by prejudice." Greg opened his mouth to respond, but seemed to think better of it. He leaned back in his chair, silent. The meeting ended with unanimous agreement to move forward with Tara's proposed changes, though she knew it would take time to win over everyone fully. As the attendees filed out, Rita stayed behind, her expression contemplative. "You're setting a high bar," Rita said, folding her arms. "Not everyone's going to like it." Tara smiled faintly. "They don't have to like it. They just have to do it." Rita chuckled softly. "Fair point. But seriously, Tara, we're doing. It's bold, and it's needed." Tara's smile deepened. "Thanks, Rita. Let's just hope it makes a difference." Later that evening, Tara sat alone in her corner office, the city skyline stretching out before her. The day had been exhausting, but it had also been invigorating. She opened her laptop and began drafting a message to all Thomas Air employees, outlining the new policies and her vision for the company's future. As she typed, a notification popped up, a thank you email from the elderly man who had stood up for her at the gate. His words were simple but profound. "Miss Thomas, your courage today reminded me that one person's stand can inspire many. Thank you for being that person. I'll always fly Thomas Air." Tara leaned back in her chair, her heart swelling with determination. She had faced a challenge, met it head-on, and turned it into an opportunity for growth, not just for herself, but for her company and everyone it touched. The road ahead would be long, but Tara Thomas wasn't afraid of turbulence. After all, true leadership wasn't about avoiding storms. It was about navigating through them with purpose and integrity. The following weeks marked the beginning of a significant transformation at Thomas Air. Tara Thomas threw herself into the work, ensuring her promises became reality. She personally oversaw the development of inclusivity training programs, partnering with experts in diversity and equity to craft a curriculum tailored to the airline industry. Simultaneously, the anonymous feedback system was rolled out across all operations. Flyers and employees alike were encouraged to report incidents, with guarantees of confidentiality and swift action. The company's internal communications buzzed with Tara's message: "Respect is not optional. It is who we are." Despite the positive strides, Tara knew the true test of these changes would come in how the staff responded when faced with real challenges. That test came sooner than she expected. One afternoon, a report came in through the new system. A passenger had been denied access to the first-class lounge based on assumptions about his appearance. He was wearing casual clothes, and the gate agent had allegedly told him he didn't belong. Tara called an immediate meeting with the involved parties, including the gate agent in question. The investigation revealed that the passenger, a black man named Arthur, was a frequent flyer and a loyal customer with platinum status. The gate agent, confronted with the evidence, admitted to making a snap judgment but insisted it wasn't intentional. Intentional or not, the impact is the same, Tara said firmly during the meeting. Arthur felt disrespected and excluded. That's not who we are. The gate agent was placed on mandatory training and probation. Tara personally reached out to Arthur, apologizing for the incident and offering him a free first-class flight to any destination of his choosing. His response was one of gratitude and appreciation, reinforcing Tara's belief that accountability, paired with genuine reconciliation, could repair trust. As months passed, Tara's reforms began to take root. Employees spoke openly about how the training sessions had changed their perspectives. The anonymous feedback system revealed fewer incidents of bias and mistreatment, signaling a cultural shift within the company. Passengers, too, noticed the difference. Reviews and social media buzz praised Thomas Air for its professionalism and inclusivity. Even Selena and Roger, the gate agents from Tara's initial experience, showed remarkable growth. Selena, once defensive and dismissive, became an advocate for the new training programs, often volunteering to mentor new hires. Roger demonstrated improved customer service and earned commendations from passengers for his kindness and attentiveness. 1 year later, Tara stood on a stage at an industry conference, accepting an award for innovation in corporate culture. As she addressed the audience, she reflected on the journey. "When I became CEO, I didn't just inherit an airline. I inherited a responsibility to our employees, our passengers, and the legacy of this company. Change isn't easy, and it isn't quick, but it is necessary." Thomas Air is proof that when we prioritize respect, equity, and humanity, we don't just improve our business, we create a better world. The audience rose to their feet in applause, affirming her leadership and vision. After the ceremony, Tara returned to her office, where she found a handwritten note waiting on her desk. It was from Arthur, the frequent flyer she had personally apologized to months earlier. "Dear Miss Thomas, thank you for showing me that people can change, and that companies can, too. I'm proud to call myself a loyal Thomas Air passenger. You've set a new standard for what an airline can be." Tara smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She placed the note alongside her father's photo on her desk, feeling a deep connection to the values he had instilled in her. Tara Thomas's leadership transformed Thomas Air into more than an airline. It became a symbol of fairness, integrity, and innovation. Her efforts inspired other companies to examine their practices and prioritize inclusivity, creating a ripple effect across industries. But for Tara, the most meaningful part of her journey was the personal connections she forged along the way. The passengers who felt seen, the employees who embraced growth, and the colleagues who became allies in her mission. As she boarded another flight months later, a passenger stopped her in the aisle. "You're Tara Thomas, right?" The CEO, the woman asked, her face lighting up with recognition. "Yes," Tara replied, her tone warm. "I just wanted to say thank you," the woman continued. "I've flown Thomas Air for years, and I've never felt as valued as I do now. You've made a real difference." Tara smiled, her heart full. "Thank you for flying with us," she said. "It's passengers like you who make it all worthwhile." Settling into her seat, Tara gazed out the window at the sky stretching endlessly ahead. Her journey as CEO was far from over, but she felt ready to face whatever turbulence lay ahead. Because at Thomas Air, the standard wasn't just about reaching new heights. It was about lifting everyone along the way.